Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
This Week at Work is the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, featuring experts in human resources and employment law to bring you practical, timely, and accurate insights so you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, October 5th, episode 251. Artificial intelligence has leaped off the pages of sci-fi novels, emerged from the silver screen, and extended its reach into nearly every facet of modern life. So how do we successfully integrate something so powerful, so new, and so dynamic? Well, today we have the privilege of hosting Ryan Kohler, an entrepreneurial luminary who wears many hats on his way to revolutionizing the recruiting industry. And his willingness to share the 3 Ps to leveraging this potential is why he's been hand-selected to present at AIM's upcoming Wayfinder Summit in Florida. We'll discover this and more on This Week at Work.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Hey, Bert, good to see you. There is a lot going on Capitol Hill. Big week for you. It's about time. Maybe we bring our friend in Washington Insider, Mr. Plunkett, back to the program, get an update.
I think that's a really good idea. Jim would be able to provide some invaluable insight as to what's going on on Capitol Hill. I don't know if how useful the insight would be, but valuable nonetheless.
It would be insight and better insight than what I'm getting for sure. But, you know, a topic for me that I appreciate more than politics is everything in the space of technology. I don't know that I would say I'm an early adapter, but I do love the advancements in technology. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the legal side of recruiting and the be carefuls and watch outs for which technology you're using, and are you creating an adverse impact and, you know, unintentionally recruiting candidates of one race or ethnic group over another. And today we're going to focus on something slightly different. We're going to talk about how to use AI to your advantage, particularly in recruiting. And we're going to do that with some people that someone you already know, and that's Ryan Kohler. Ryan is a good friend of AIM and has done a lot of things to help our members. I mean, it's really been tremendous. And in fact, he's going to be a speaker for us at our Wayfinder Summit down in Orlando at the end of the month. And he'll give us a little sneak preview into that. So we're going to get back to Ryan in just a moment. But maybe before we do that, Bert, we should get into the polls, maybe? Is that something you want to try and kick off today?
Sure. Before you can even begin to gloss over the polls, I want to plant the seed for you there, Phil, on the polls. As a matter of fact, why don't I give it a shot today?
Hey, go for it, Bert. You got it.
All right. So the first one is, in what ways have you already utilized AI integration strategies in your hiring process? So there's 5 potential responses for folks there. So give people a chance to look over that. Predictive analytics to optimize sourcing strategy, resume screening and job matching, chatbots for initial candidate processing, automated interview scheduling and coordination, and assessment and skill testing. And the second question for today...
We should make one clarification. For those in the industry term is resume, not resume.
Oh, thank you. Wow, I really blew that one there, huh?
Oh, Bert.
So, see, there you got me, Phil. All right.
Hey,
the second one, do you have
week,
HR...
I'm taking the back. You don't get them next week.
All right, that's fair enough. I'll just remind you to not skip them. So the second one is, do you have HR policies for AI? And the answers are yes, we have specific policies that align with our organizational AI integration plan. Yes, we have general policies to guide the more common use of AI. No, this falls within our standard ethical and legal policies. No, the use of AI doesn't pose any direct risk to our organization. And then we did give you an out here, and that one is other. So we don't usually do that, but that is one of the available responses today. How'd I do, Phil, other than resume versus resume?
I think I give you 8 out of 10, Bert.
Right.
Maybe 8 out of 10 stars, but we'll work on it. I know that you're a quick learner, and our friend Ryan will give you some tips, maybe how to avoid that. But we would love to get your comments on those polls. And Bert, are you ready to resume with Lawyer on the Clock?
I am.
All right, Bert, you are on the clock.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
All right, so we've got a few topics I want to cover for Lawyer on the Clock today. The first is strikes. And as everyone knows, that the United Auto Workers are striking, the big three auto manufacturers, seeking a huge increase in their contract. And General Motors came out yesterday and said that the historic strike by the UAW has already cost them $200 million in the first 2 weeks. And that prompted the company to secure a $6 billion line of credit to shore up liquidity. And that, I think, demonstrates that GM is really buckling in for a prolonged work stoppage. We all know here in Missouri that the union on September 15th walked out of a Missouri plant. And that's just one of the many plants around the country that is being struck by the United Auto Workers. The UAW president, Sean Fain, plans to update the union's 150,000 members at Ford, GM, and Stellantis, which is Chrysler, on Friday of this week about the status of the strike. Very importantly, I want to share with the union said on Monday it presented a new contract offer to GM. GM in turn said despite the offer, significant gaps remain, and GM has been forced to lay off 2,100 workers at 5 plants in 4 states as a result of the strike. Ford said Wednesday it was laying off an additional 400 workers in Michigan starting today because of the strike, after previously laying off 930 workers, and Stellantis has laid off 370 workers in Ohio and Atlanta because of the strike. Unfortunately, this has a huge ripple effect because that means nearly 30% of auto parts makers surveyed by an industry trade group said they have had to lay off some workers due to the UAW strikes, and another 60% expect more layoffs by mid-October if the walkouts continue. So it's going to have just a huge ripple effect on a very fragile economy that we're dealing with already. So that'll lead us into one of the other topics I want to chat about today, Phil, which is a topic, an article I read from a publication called the Business Insider. And the title of the article was "The Boss is Back in Charge." And I know you and I've chatted as we prepped for the program today, and you and I may not totally see eye to eye on the premise of the article, but I would encourage people to take a look at the article. And again, it's called "The Boss is Back in Charge." And it basically, the premise is that between the rise of job-threatening AI, strict return to office mandates, and sweeping layoffs, it feels like bosses are clawing back what little remains of employees' power that came from the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the general premise.
Slightly different. I did read that article, and I mean, there are things I can agree with within the article. The issue for me was, we have an increasing job vacancy rate, and we're still at like 9.6 million through the end of August job openings that we're having a hard time filling. And, if you took that back to the early part of this year where it was 10.5, we really haven't changed or made an impact with our sweeping layoffs that we talk about. And then the other part of that with AI, and it'll be interesting to see our poll results and maybe get Ryan's opinion on this here in just a minute, is most people I'm talking to, and maybe it's Midwest versus the coast, I don't know, but they're not using AI in any way, let alone in any routine, productive, strategic way from that standpoint. So those two pieces are where I just kind of get a little sideways with the article.
Yeah.
What I agree with is the gap of talent.
Yeah, that's what you and I chatted about before the program, and I think that It's really interesting. I think the article did recognize, especially toward the end, that AI really has not cost people that many jobs right now. People are still trying to figure out how to properly use AI within the workplace. But what that's led to is that some companies are not hiring because they're trying to evaluate whether AI can, in fact, replace some employees. And so it's kind of caused a little bit of a pause there. Now, you are correct on the statistics about the number of jobs that are available out there. It hasn't come down that much from earlier in the year. But as you remember, you and I had some discussions, and one of the things that is significant, you need to parse out those numbers, is that where the jobs are does not necessarily match where the job seekers are right now. You have a lot of people in the tech industry who have been laid off, mass layoffs, and those folks aren't going to go take those jobs at the fast food restaurants and the restaurant and retail industry. The economy's really out of whack right now, or the job market's really out of whack with where the jobs are. And so while there are a
Point
tremendous,
of
yeah,
skill, that's a bigger issue than both issues discussed in the article. And the skill gap wasn't really addressed in my opinion, but yeah.
that's correct. I do want to point out, I think that that there were some really interesting or surveys that they mentioned in the article here, and they did a survey of 628 job switchers in June, and a quarter of those in that survey regretted quitting their last roles, and 42% said their new jobs have not lived up to their expectations. And I think they quoted an MIT professor who said that, quote, "I think we were at a period of tight labor markets and a growing recognition of workers' desire to have a say in how they work." But then she warned that a narrative was being driven by a few big companies, and it was a little too early to say how much that has shifted.
Yeah.
So I think what they're saying is return to office mandates are getting tougher despite employees pushing back. That charge really has been led by big tech and banks with various degrees of severity and pushback. So I just think that it's a really interesting article, and it'll kind of help segue us into our discussion with Ryan as it relates to the AI. And then one other one, Phil, real quickly, that I do want to mention here. There's also a survey that was released yesterday by Gallup, the polling company, and Gallup put out a really interesting survey, or analyzed a survey that they conducted back in May, and that is that fewer than half of U.S. adults, 41%, believe businesses should take a public stance on current events. That's down from 48% in 2022, and so I think of things that have gone on with like Target and Anheuser-Busch with Bud Light, and the pushback that's happened. And one of the things I have suggested in the program is that businesses really need to carefully evaluate whether they want to wade into issues that are divisive, not just for their consumers, but divisive for their employees. And remember that organizations are made up of all kinds of different people from all kinds of different backgrounds. And most people probably aren't sitting around saying, "I wonder where X company stands on the issue of this political or social issue." Most people aren't sitting around wondering that. But when the companies wade into those issues, for better or for worse, they're taking a risk. And I think this new survey by Gallup really demonstrates that. Now, it is interesting that political party identification has the strongest influence on whether Americans believe corporations should take a public stance. Most Democrats, 62%, according to the survey, believe businesses should take a public stance on current events. That's compared with just 17% of Republicans and 36% of independents. Interestingly, while still high, the percentage of while still high, the percentage of Democrats who believe businesses should take a stance has declined from 75% in 2022 So I think the numbers do show a shifting attitude on this.
Yeah. No, that's a great insight. I know we always say use some caution, be smart about it, be strategic about it. Don't be reactive when you're jumping and wading into these waters. That's good insight. Let's switch our time here to Ryan Kohler, our guest today. By way of short introduction, Ryan, as I said, is a great friend of the program. He is the founder of an organization called ApplicantPro. He has designed a great system that he is available to us and you as members of AIM. And Ryan, you're joining somewhere with palm trees in the background. You're looking pretty good there, my friend. Tell us where you're at and what you got going on today, and we got in some Q&A for you here.
I am in how do you say it? Curacao,
Curacao,
Venezuela. Yep,
yeah.
On my honeymoon. But I'm coming to speak, and so I was like, oh man, I gotta jump on this program. My wife is waiting for the scuba boat.
Wait a minute, Ryan, did you just say you're on your honeymoon down there and you're joining us on the program? Oh my God.
Yeah, but both of us are on our second marriages, so that means that we've had practice at this.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Last time we
today's topics are cool. Yeah.
Say that again, Ryan.
I said I think today's topics are cool and super interesting. Just the kind of the feedback from the organizations and where we're at. I think chaos. I was doing really good until they fired up the weed eaters.
Yeah. Well, I can't background noise, but yeah, I know this topic of AI is right up your alley. Maybe before we do that, Ryan, what is it you got going on today that you would want our listeners to know about? And then we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming program and maybe what you will be promoting while we're down in Orlando.
Yeah, I think it's just a super interesting time. If you go back, I've spent a bunch of time thinking back on kind of major technological shifts. So think back to the email time and to the internet first invention and coming along and actually being adopted in business. If you go back to those times, we didn't know how email was going to impact either. Yeah. Right? Like mail carriers were thinking they were going to be out of work forever, that people would quit sending mail. Like if you think it's called the hype cycle. And we'll talk about this when I'm down, but if you learn, I think I've got a video on it we'll send out. But the one thing to kind of understand and frame in what's going on is the hype cycle. Anytime there is a new major technology that's that has massive disruptive ability, you're going to end up in a hype cycle. It's just fact of life. As something new is invented by, a geeky nerd, then at some point those geeky nerds need two things. They need help and they need money. And in order to get other geeky nerds on their team and in order to raise venture capital, they have to overhype the potential of what could be. It's just built into the system of venture capital. It's never going away. And so you get this massive amount of hype, and then everybody tries to use it and you see it crash back down of like, oh, it didn't do what was promised. It's kind of like thinking about, I have an order for a Cybertruck. Elon has promised when that's coming out. I don't take that as a hard promise because I understand what it's like to invent something new. I'm not going, Tesla, the stock is going to tank because the Cybertruck's not out yet. Those were much more projections of what could happen, and leading adopters understand that stuff changes. Right. And that's where you're at with AI. And so every single time that you hear anything, this idea of like, where is the hype or hate coming from? Is this coming from somebody who has something to gain from promising the world? Or is this coming from somebody who's the status quo is being attacked potentially by AI and they're trying to pull the reins and slow it down? And that gives us a way to see through. It's kind of like even on the same subject of getting back to work. Everybody's got an agenda when they're talking about that concept or that point. And you have to be able to figure out the agenda to figure out how meaningful their conversation is.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of looking at it. And I'm looking forward. I have not seen that hype.
Like I think the skills gap is a super interesting one. For the last 3 weeks, I've probably built 20 different coaches out of ChatGPT that like we send them out to job seekers. So we're like, hey, if you want to get a job as a marketer, but you have no marketing experience, load this thread into ChatGPT and it will turn into your personal marketing coach. Just like in 5 minutes, they can load that thread, log in there and say #help. And it will say, what are you doing in marketing today? Tell me what you're doing and let me help you. So collaborative, kind of like a coach or a mentor being there, cuts out some of that skills gap, because you're giving every employee technically like a mentor that's available all the time to them and can be trained in like 5 minutes per topic. So the ways to use AI, I think, are just, if you go back to your poll question, my answer is I'm not thinking I'm using any of those.
Let's take a look at our poll results this far, Ryan, and get some opinion on that. It's a favorite thing we like to do with our guests. I don't know if you all are able to see that here.
Want me to read it out? Is it kind of small for you?
Yeah, please do, Nick.
Okay, so in what ways has your organization already utilized AI integration strategies in the hiring process? We have 83.4% say none. We have, and then matching in second place, but barely in second, not in last, is resume screening and job matching and assessment and skills testing. So,
and I think we get on a lot of time on the show, Ryan, we've chatted about, the screening and job matching part of AI, and to be careful that, it's not set up to give us, predetermined results. But I know as far as job posting and attraction, you've done some very clever things and have taught us some very clever ways to going forward. What's your thoughts on any of those results?
Yeah, and I think, again, that goes right to it. The AI companies want to use it or want to talk about the future of how powerful it could be, but we miss the point. Like, the number one thing that a company could do right now in recruiting is rewrite their job ad. Sorry, I'm going to find this bar a bit quieter. Is rewrite their job ad. And the reason they don't rewrite their job ads is because they're too busy, or they're not that creative, or, fill in the blank, whatever it is. And so the AI companies want to push, hey, it's kind of like, why does a Lamborghini go 200 miles an hour when the speed limit never is over 70? Because Lamborghini wants to show how fast a car can go. But so if you take all these things, most of these portions either need to be built into a platform to be used, which means that's out of the business owner or HR person's hands, or weed you into legal areas of either we're uploading people's, proprietary information or whatever the case may be.
Bert, let's look at this next poll result and get some opinions from you, our listeners. It looks like, does your organization have HR policies for AI? According to this, we have no one that's saying, yes, we have specific policies. Welcome back, Ryan.
Maybe.
Bert, I know your firm works in this space to help develop policies for us. It's kind of a new space on AI policies specific to AI. Is this something that you're starting to see more requests from in the firm?
Yeah, definitely. Now I think it's interesting on both the polls, looking at them together, Phil, and if you could go back to the first one real briefly, Nick. The number there at the bottom of the first poll that shows that 83.4% are not using AI integration strategies in the hiring process. That means, again, most employers really are not using AI for anything of significance. They're experimenting with it. Now, if you could flip forward to the next poll, Nick, so you take that 84% roughly are not using AI, and then you look at this, does your organization have HR policies for AI? And only 20% say yes. Those are probably roughly the 20% that are using the AI. Now, I think it's really significant here is the federal government, and in particular the EEOC. Ryan talked about the hype cycle. I love that. I've never heard that term before, but I will be using it.
We need to get you to come down to Orlando, Bert, and come visit us during the summit at the end of the month in Orlando and hear more about that hype cycle.
I love it. It's the hype cycle. Part of it is being fed by the government itself, and the government, the EOC in particular. One of the areas that the EOC has as part of its strategic enforcement plan that we covered last week on the program is AI. And so the EEOC has gotten very, very aggressive on its agenda as it relates to AI. And so you've got legal requirements now. If you are an organization and you're going to be using AI, you definitely need to do it carefully and in compliance with the law. And the big thing that the EEOC is looking for with respect to the use of AI, and eventually the courts will be looking at this as well, is the AI, the artificial intelligence, learning bias, particularly in the applicant realm. It's probably not as relevant in the decision-making realm with respect to people's actual employment once they've started. That's more performance-based. But during the hiring process, is AI filtering out applicants? Is it learning to discriminate against certain age groups, certain sexes, certain racial backgrounds?
And I think if it's really good AI, it would do just the opposite of that.
Yeah, well,
If the AI is done right in that process, it should do just the opposite, because it shouldn't matter in that case. You wouldn't have the human bias built into it if it's done right.
Their challenge is that it's all based off what it was trained on. And
exactly.
if you think about that, that's why like deciding where to wade is probably the 2023 for the rest of this year goal of a business. Where am I safe to wade into AI? So if we take recruiting as a good example, writing job ads, perfectly safe, creating screening questions, coming up with interview questions, creating an entire new hire training series of emails to introduce them to your culture and all that kind of stuff. That's all wildly safe area. Or at least you're equally safe there as you were yesterday having a job description that doesn't get any results. But when you step into say, like, can it predict who we should hire? You have to, one of two things is going to have to happen. A, we train it on past data, which would be, here's the resumes of people who were hired. Therefore, if that data was based off of bias of, for instance, if you went through all the data of salespeople, you would be teaching AI that sports players make great salespeople. If you're a collegiate athlete, you make a good salesperson. Yeah, Phil's laughing because he knows where this comes from. Those are the people that sales managers have liked to hire for decades. Therefore, when you train AI saying who is most likely to be in this job, that bias is built into it. Yeah. So it's continuing a bias. Now, option number two is somebody comes along and tweaks the algorithm, which freaks everybody out just as well, of saying, no, I want to push my finger down on not that. I want to adjust the algorithm for it. And so you're kind of back to that same problem. There's hacks around it, though. To take the great thing about AI isn't we think it's going to make us more efficient, so we're going to be able to lay people off. But instead, if we think about it and say it will make us more effective and more personalized, that's where we start to see that, hey, I don't want to actually do only 10 hours a week worth of marketing instead of 40. I just want to get great results out of the 40 hours a week. I want to be able to change the voice of every email based off of the person reading it. I want 10 variations of my job ads, not one variation. I want those types of things get you around the bias. But if you want, so for instance, to localize that for, say, who to pick, I upload a resume into ChatGPT and I say, tell me what screening questions to ask. That would be still safe because the human is still there. And that's, if you want to know where we're at today, collaboration between AI and a human solves most of these problems. Where the fear and the problems come in is AI instead of a human. When a human is asking AI to do something that they couldn't do themselves, therefore they couldn't check the work. That's where most of the gray area or the red area sits. is asking, but as soon as you get back to collaborative, hey, throw these 3 resumes in there, come back with a job ad that they would like to read based off their vocabulary. Tell me how this one resume is different than the other 3, so I can go and use that knowledge in an interview. That's all safe area because you're collaborating with a tool. You're just Googling much faster with somebody to read it and disseminate it for you.
And that's what I love about this topic. It's why I'm really excited. Ryan is going to be joining us on October 27th at the third HR Summit down in Orlando. It's going to be a great topic to hear about, to ask questions on. And what I can tell you is, I guess it was about 6 months ago we were together, Ryan, and almost since that time and since our conversation and with the few tips that you had shown me at the time, I use AI almost every single day today. When I say AI, I'm using Chat GPT almost every single day for, if not one thing, multiple things throughout the day. It really has become a way that I work, and it saves significant time. And I encourage all of our employees to use it. But I'm glad to hear you say that. We are using it in conjunction with our human oversight. It's not left to its own accord. And at this point, I don't even think it's good enough for that. But as we put our minds with it, and then we even get a better product. And when I do show it to other professionals, they're excited about that. So I invite you to join. You'll be able to join by simulcast or in person if you're in Orlando. Get to meet Ryan himself and hear more about what he has to say. Ryan, I just want to say we're up against the clock here, but thank you so much for joining on your honeymoon. Tell your lovely bride we got a chance to meet her last time. Congratulations. I hope you bring her with you to Orlando. Bert, good job. Yep. And Bert, we will be announcing a program next week that you and I are going to be kicking off for our Illinois paid time off compliance program that you and I are going to be hosting for our members that are struggling to find their way through that new law, which comes into effect January 1, 2024. With that,
you and I will be together on November 2nd for that.
Yep. Thank you, Bert. And with that, we will be back here next week at the same time, 7:30 Central Time, 8:30 Eastern Time. We'll see you then. Until then, go be good to somebody.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link aimea.org/thisweekatwork, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.